This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
Chicago, the 1930s. Notorious mobster Al Capone ruled the city until a young Treasury agent named Elliot Ness brought down his empire as a leader of the immortal crime-busting unit, the Untouchables. But after his success in Chicago, Elliot Ness encountered the one criminal he could not bring to justice, a fiendish serial killer who may have claimed as many as 30 victims. Join us for this special segment, Elliot Ness's Unsolved Mystery. Also, the controversial murder case of prison reformer Michael Franke. Shortly before he died, Franke began to collect information about corruption in the Oregon prison system. In 1989, he was found stabbed to death just outside his office. Did someone want Michael Franke silenced? Permanently. In September 1989, 3-month-old Ryan Stallings was hospitalized in critical condition, the apparent victim of poisoning. 3 days later, Ryan died. His mother, Patty Stallings, was charged with murder and subsequently convicted. Patty and her husband insist that Ryan died from a rare genetic disorder which now plagues their second child. The prosecutor, however, maintains that she is guilty. Join me as we examine this controversial case, the final appeal of Patty Stallings. Chicago, 1929. Prohibition was the law of the land. With alcohol illegal, speakeasies sprung up on every street corner and in every alleyway. Bootlegging and police corruption were rampant. An aggressive 26-year-old Treasury agent was hired to smash the gangland rackets that gripped the city. His name, Elliot Ness. After crushing Capone in Chicago, Elliot Ness became one of the most respected lawmen in the country. When I portrayed Ness on television, I learned that like many well-known figures, there was a secret private side to his public persona. Those who knew him agree that his iron-willed, quiet countenance cloaked a fearless determination to wipe out corruption. But he is also a man who was not above bending the law himself to bring a criminal to justice. After the Untouchables, Ness went on to encounter the one case he could not crack, a case which would haunt him for the rest of his life. September 1934.
Mr. Ness.
Elliot Ness came to Cleveland, Ohio as public safety director, a position comparable to a modern-day police commissioner.
Police corruption.
When Ness arrived, Cleveland was a known safe haven for gangsters and street criminals. Over the next year, arrests went up and crime went down. But there was another evil afoot in the city which would soon overshadow Ness's primary mandate.
2 boys playing in Kingsbury Run come across these. 2 bodies, both decapitated.
In September of 1935, the mutilated bodies of 2 men were found in Kingsbury Run, a slum district swarming with hobos, prostitutes, and street toughs.
Keep me posted.
Will do.
At the time, the case was dismissed as a vicious but routine double homicide. By the summer of 1936, 3 more bodies had been found. The discovery of a 6th victim that fall threw Cleveland into an uproar.
Mr. Ness, body's been found under the bridge. 2 kids found it. Coroner's been here. Nothing's been moved. It's been here about 5 hours.
When number 6 turned up, it was like a bombshell going off. The city really exploded. The press and the public now had no doubts that there was a serial killer out there, that this individual was going to keep killing, and they wanted it stopped.
The body count in the Kingsbury Run area would eventually reach 12. As many as 18 other murders in greater Cleveland were thought to be connected to the case. The killer primarily stalked society's outcasts and vagrants. Men as well as women fell prey. Only 2 of the victims were ever positively identified: Edward Andracy, a small-time hood, and Florence Palillo, a 41-year-old prostitute. All the victims had been decapitated, in some cases while they were still alive. 5 were found floating in water, the blood drained completely out of their bodies. The tabloids dubbed the killer the Butcher of Kingsbury Run and the Torso Slayer.
Ness, they found the body here late this morning. The arms and legs have been cut off. Scene of the crime, the men are still looking.
Decapitated?
Yes, sir. Looks like the same killer. We're having trouble keeping the crowd back.
Ness got into the case quite extensively. In fact, he devoted almost full time to it. But at the same time, there's also sort of an uneasiness with Ness about this. He didn't know quite how to proceed with this case. It wasn't a matter of like finding out where the brewery was and where the mobsters were hiding and go and smash your way into the place. This was a different type of criminal that Elliot Ness was facing.
The bodies were kept for about, I'd say 6 months. We have no idea who they are, but it certainly was a skillful dissection. The murderer was probably...
Elliot had made a profile that he figured the killer might be.
Thank you, Doctor.
And he determined that it had to be somebody, from the way these bodies were cut up, somebody with a certain amount of medical knowledge. Plus the fact, had to be a very strong man to carry these bodies all over and dump them where he did. And so he had this profile. It has to be a big man, strong, an expert with a scalpel.
Ness had reached an impasse. He was determined to search every dwelling in Kingsbury Run, but had no legal grounds to swear out search warrants. The solution was vintage Elliot Ness.
Afternoon, ma'am. We're with the Cleveland Fire Department. We're conducting fire safety inspections.
He cleverly skirted the need for warrants by pairing detectives with fire officials and ordering widespread safety inspections.
Live alone?
There was a thought among Ness and other police officers that they were going to find this laboratory that was going to have blood-splattered walls and have arms and legs lying over in a corner, and maybe a catch of heads in another corner. That's what they were looking for, and Ness's men spent almost a full week searching almost every place, almost every apartment, every dwelling they could find in that area, and they weren't able to turn up a thing.
Ness next pinpointed every doctor and hospital worker in Cleveland.
There he is, let's go.
Even the county coroner was not above suspicion. Hundreds of people were put under surveillance,
Where have you been tonight?
questioned,
The hospital.
and detained.
I fell asleep, caught a few hours. Where were you after that?
What are you doing in Cleveland?
I'm in town on business.
What business?
I'm a salesman. I sell surgical supplies.
The investigation still led nowhere.
I come up 2 or 3 times a month.
The killer remained at
What are
large,
you doing in Kingsbury Run Wednesday night?
and the case began to consume Elliot Ness.
I usually go out and hit a couple of bars, have a drink.
In August of 1938, victims number 11 and 12 were found. The last scattered in a rubbish heap just 200 yards from Elliot Ness's office.
It was evident after the last 2 bodies were found that the killer was now becoming more daring by where he left the bodies, right really under Elliot Ness's window. And it was almost like it was a cat and mouse game and sort of a catch me if you can type thing.
They were bragging Cleveland was now one of the safest cities in the United States, except for the killer, who was still chopping off heads and cutting up bodies and all this kind of stuff. And he knew he had to do something desperately because the people were clamoring. All the people in town were insane about this insanity that was going on. And they were frightened. They were scared to death.
The storm of public criticism drove Ness to take drastic measures. Less than 48 hours after the discovery of victims number 11 and 12, the police descended upon Kingsbury Run's hobo jungles. They rounded up more than 60 transients, hoping that the killer might be among them.
And this was his old untouchable style of raid, where you know where the bad guy is and you go in and get him. And he really thought that this might work. And at the very least, he could remove some of the people that the killer was preying on. But it completely backfired for him. There was a great wave of public opinion that this was the act of a desperate man, and that his tactics had been brutal, and they didn't really solve anything.
In a final, radical attempt to stop the slaughter, Ness ordered the shantytown burned to the ground. Of those arrested that night, none turned out to be the killer. After the shantytown was destroyed, the murders in Cleveland mysteriously stopped. But the case was not over for Elliot Ness. He remained bitter and dissatisfied. According to some experts, he was all the more frustrated by the fact he believed he knew the killer's identity, but could never come up with enough evidence to make an arrest. Ness's suspect belonged to a prominent Cleveland family. In 1938, the man had himself committed to a state mental institution.
Ness believed that he had caught the killer, primarily because after this man committed himself to a mental hospital, the killing stopped. And he said, I am certain this is the man, the profiles fits the profile, and I'm sure that this is the bird who was doing all these killings. It's pretty clear that if Ness had accused this man, whose family was socially prominent, he could have been libelous and been sued. And he was a very cautious guy as far as covering the letter of the law.
Incredibly, more than 10 years later, Elliot Ness received a number of postcards from a patient in a mental institution, taunting him with references to the brutal slayings.
The man who was sending him these postcards might have just been another kook, but he was convinced that he had found a guy.
Elliot Ness never fully recovered from his disappointment in being unable to close the case. He resigned as public safety director in 1942. 5 years later, he ran for mayor of Cleveland. When questioned about the torso slayings during the campaign, Ness enigmatically replied, "That case has been solved." Elliot Ness lost the election by a landslide and left Cleveland. He never returned to law enforcement. Next, a young mother convicted of murder wins her final appeal. July 9th, 1989, St. Louis, Missouri. A young mother rushed her critically ill son to Cardinal Glennon Hospital. The baby was 3-month-old Ryan Stallings from nearby Jefferson County. Since birth, he had suffered from chronic gastric distress. On the day Ryan was brought to the emergency room, his breathing had become extremely labored and he was vomiting uncontrollably. Ryan was immediately placed in the pediatric intensive care unit.
He was, hooked up to a respirator and all kinds of tubes going in and out of him, and it was awful.
It was just a shock to see a little baby incapacitated the way he was. It was to the point where they said, well, they don't know how long He's going to be here. We don't know what's wrong with him yet, so you might as well just go to the waiting room and stay out there until we can tell you what's wrong.
Hi, Mrs. Stallings.
Yes, sir.
I'm Dr. Bailey, Chief of Pediatrics. Happy to see you. This is Mrs. Jurgensen of Family Services.
David and Patty Stallings rented a room at the hospital to be near their son. After 3 agonizing days, the Stallings learned that Ryan would recover.
Ryan's fine. There are no problems there.
The diagnosis, however, was stunning. Ryan had apparently been poisoned.
When the lab test came back, we found a couple of substances. Those substances are ethyl glycol and acetone. Ethyl glycol is the substance that you'll find in radiator antifreeze, and acetone is in fingernail polish remover, for example.
He goes, do you have any in the house? I said, yeah. Patty uses it on her fingernails to remove her old fingernail polish. He goes, well, that's got acetone in it. I said, okay. He said, do you have antifreeze? I said, yes, I have antifreeze. I just rebuilt the radiator on my vehicle, and I had a partial gallon left in the basement. He says, well, that's what we're saying he may have gotten. Do you happen to know how he could have gotten it?
They were very polite yet suspicious. They would not allow us to see Ryan alone. There would have to be at least 2 nurses or a doctor present. You know, we were never allowed to be on his bedside alone. You know, that bothered me, but I still didn't understand because I wasn't looking at it the way they were, I guess.
Just have to ask you a few questions, if you could come in for a moment.
Sure.
David, you have a seat. I'll come get you in a minute.
That same day, the police were brought in to investigate.
We were split up and talked to by detectives. And then that's when I knew, because they immediately started asking me, well, is there a problem at home? Are you and David fighting? They were saying that they knew that that baby had been poisoned by either me or my husband. It infuriated me. And I was devastated. I was blown away. I just could not believe that they could even think. I mean, Ryan was my world. You know, Ryan, he was so beautiful. He was perfect.
Ryan's condition improved. After 12 days, he was released from the hospital, but not to the custody of his parents.
A social worker come up to us and told us that they were taking custody of Ryan from us. And at that point, I became very angry. Why are you doing this to us, is what I told her. And she said, well, this is policy. When there's a suspected poisoning, we take children from the parents and put them in foster care.
Yes, boy.
Patty and David's contact with Ryan was severely restricted. They were allowed only a 1-hour visit each week on Thursdays.
It's a good boy.
Ryan knew when we met him the first time, he was so happy to see both of us again. He just smiled, the biggest smile you could ever possibly see on a baby's face. And we were just totally in love with our child. We were so glad that we finally was able to see him again.
I just could not wait till Thursday. You know, my whole week, I would tell everybody over and over and over how last Thursday went. And that was my life, Thursday morning.
For 5 weeks, the parental visits continued. During the 6th visit, Patty was left alone with Ryan for a short time. 3 days later, Ryan would suffer another severe attack of vomiting. Once again, he would be rushed to the hospital. Once again, the diagnosis would be poisoning.
I have a warrant for your arrest.
A what?
I've got to take her in now.
We were getting out of the car, and they said, stop right there. And, you know, I turned around, and I was like, well, come on into the house, you know? And they said, no, you're not allowed to go into the house. They immediately slapped handcuffs on me and said, you're under arrest for assault.
Watch your step, please.
Come on, wait, give me 5 minutes. Come on, you gotta.
At the station, we don't have 5.
Patty Stallings was booked on charges of poisoning her infant son.
I knew it wasn't true. I didn't care what they thought. I just thought, well, you know, I'll be home in a couple hours. This will be over with. You know, I'll get to go be with Ryan. And then the day turned into a night. And then it got really serious. I got really scared.
While Patty languished in jail, her son was dying. Ryan was placed on life support systems. David Stallings found himself trapped in a private hell.
The doctors come up to me and tell me that they have a feeling that Ryan's not going to make it, and that maybe I should get in contact with a minister and have him baptized in that. I tried to get Patty up there, and all I got from the judge was no, absolutely not. I'm not going to let a baby killer up there. And I said, this lady did not kill this baby. And when they finally come back to me and told me that we need to know if we can turn him off, I told them, fine, go ahead and shut the machines down. But I wanted to be in there with him. So for 3 hours, I sat there with him in my arms, knowing that Patty couldn't be there, watching this meter on this machine go down each time his heart would beat. It was hard. It's something I would never ask anybody ever to do. Approximately about 6:30, a doctor came in, and she shut the machine down so I could not see any more of his heart rate. She took him from me and said that it's over with. He's gone.
They called me back about 9 o'clock that night, and I went up to the phone, and it was David's voice, and he told me he died. And I started begging that he could come up and see me, and this deputy on duty said he could. So
Ryan Stallings died on September 7th, 1989. He was not yet 6 months old. His mother, Patty, was now charged with first-degree murder and held without bail. She was not allowed to attend Ryan's funeral. A few weeks later, Patty Stallings discovered she was pregnant again. For 6 months, she remained incarcerated, subject to a battery of mental fitness tests. On February 27, 1990, David Stallings Jr. was born at a Madison County hospital. Even though David Stallings Sr. was not a suspect and had been charged with no crime at all, he was not allowed to take David Jr. home with him. The baby became a ward of the state and was placed in foster care. Ironically, this devastating blow would turn out to be a stroke of good fortune. Without it, Patty and David Stallings might have been accused of poisoning their second son. When David Stallings Jr. was 2 weeks old, he began to exhibit symptoms identical to the ones that had plagued his brother Ryan. The St. Louis Children's Hospital diagnosed David's illness as a rare genetic disorder, methylmalonic acidemia, or MMA, in which the body produces chemical byproducts that may be remarkably similar to the ethylene glycol found in antifreeze. Unsolved Mysteries contacted an independent medical expert about MMA.
It would be very simple to confuse the diagnosis of MMA with multiple poisonings because the symptoms are very similar. But more importantly than that, MMA and other similar disorders are very rare, and the majority of doctors either will never have seen a case, or if they have seen a case, didn't know that they saw it and actually confused it.
While prosecutors reevaluated the medical evidence, Patty Stallings was released from jail. Pending the outcome of the investigation, Patty was denied visitation rights with David Jr.
I thought it was over, you know, as far as the nightmare of being accused of hurting Ryan. I was positive that, you know, even my lawyer said it was over. You know, there was no way that they could not see the truth right in front of their eyes.
Jefferson County officials continued to pursue the case. The prosecution's position was that Ryan Stallings had not died from MMA. In the judge's chambers, they cited 4 expert witnesses.
But, Your Honor, I did.
Patty's lawyer presented no expert opinions. The judge agreed with the prosecution. Neither David Stallings Jr. nor the symptoms he shared with Ryan were allowed to be presented as evidence at Patty's trial.
We were concerned that if it came out that David Jr., or Ryan for that matter, had this methylmalonic acidosis, unless it could be shown that he actually died of that or it was some kind of a contributing factor to his death, we believe that that would not be relevant and, in fact, might cause the jury to go off on a wild goose chase and make a decision based on something that's really not relevant.
First cases in the family are often missed, and it's only when it reoccurs again that the medical practitioners are tipped off to the fact that this may well be a genetic disorder, and maybe the first child had that as well.
Without the medical testimony, the case against Patty Stallings seemed virtually airtight. The prosecution focused on the events of Thursday, August 31st, 1989, Patty and David's 6th parental visit with Ryan.
Buddy. On the 6th visit, my parents were invited for the first time.
Okay, well, thanks for the toy.
And then about 20 minutes into the visit, my mom and dad decided they were going to go ahead and leave and let Patty and I have the rest of the time with him.
We'll be right back, Patty. Okay.
So I escorted my mom and dad out of the room, walked down to the hall. I was out of the room no more than 45 seconds at the most.
On one visit, Patricia was left alone with the child, anywhere from about 3 minutes to about 8 minutes. And during that time, did actually feed the child a bottle. The child, again, got the same symptoms had before, came back into the hospital, was diagnosed with ethylene glycol poisoning. At that time, a number of bottles were also examined for possible traces. And while there were negative effects in all the bottles but one bottle, which was identified as the bottle she had fed the baby with, actually contained traces of ethylene glycol. That bottle had actually been prepared by the foster mother and retrieved from the baby bag during the visit, but the state believes, and certainly circumstantial evidence suggests, that she slipped ethylene glycol or antifreeze into the bottle during that feeding.
What they were trying to say was she started feeding him before anybody got in there. And that's wrong, that's incorrect. What happened was I walked back to the cubbyhole where Patty was with Ryan. He just started getting a little cranky, and so I reached into the bag and took the baby bottle out and started feeding him. I saw the bottle. I did not smell, I did not see any discoloration in the bottle whatsoever. There was nothing done to that bottle, absolutely nothing.
According to Patty's lawyers, Ryan's symptoms did not appear until 3.5 days after the visit.
I would be amazed if something as volatile and as easily diffusible as ethylene glycol would require 80 hours in order to cause symptoms in a young child. I believe it would have to happen a lot faster than that. And therefore, it seems much less probable that this was poisoning.
Ryan was taken from the visit by the DFS worker to the foster parents' home, but later that day, or actually early the next morning, was taken to what we call respite home, a temporary foster parents who kept them just for the weekend. The second set of foster parents, not knowing what the child was like, may well have overlooked symptoms that the first set would have seen.
Defendant will rise and face the court. On count 1, assault with a deadly weapon, the court finds you guilty as charged. On count 2, murder in the first degree, the court finds you guilty as charged.
On March 4th, 1991, Patty Stallings was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her son, David Jr., is now 1 year old. Patty has seen him only 3 times, twice just after his birth, the third time when he was a week old. Each visit was limited to 1 hour. David Stallings Sr. is allowed to see his son once a week.
I cannot see how they can live with themselves, knowing that they sent an innocent woman to jail the rest of her life for something that she didn't do. If Ryan would have been correctly diagnosed with MMA, none of this would have happened. None of the series of events in the last 2 years would have happened. It all depended on whether he was correctly diagnosed, which he was not.
I truly do believe in the system, and I think that when 12 people heard the evidence and they returned the verdict that they did, that it's the right verdict. If it's not the right verdict, they're already started the ball rolling in the appellate procedures, and if there is a problem or if new evidence does come up which could link Ryan's death to MMA, well, certainly it will and should be retried. But in the meantime, I'm comfortable with it.
I've lost 1 child to MMA. My second child is stricken with MMA and may not live. He's a year old now, and they're still not sure how to treat him. I lost my freedom. I've lost everything.
On the night this story aired, calls from physicians familiar with MMA poured into our telecenter. Patty Stallings' new attorneys petitioned the court to grant her another trial based on the fact that she had previously received ineffectual counsel. On July 30th, 1991, Patty Stallings was granted a new trial and released from prison.
After the Unsolved Mysteries aired, people were writing and calling and just wanting to know, how can we help? And I can't thank those people enough because, I mean, through all of that, wheels started turning and everything just started pushing forward really fast.
Along with Ryan's remaining serum
On September 20th, 1991, a press conference was held in St. Louis. Dr. Piero Ronaldo of Yale University revealed that independent serum tests showed Ryan Stallings had definitely died of MMA. Consequently, the prosecuting attorney dropped all charges against Patty Stallings.
Unfortunately, we can't undo the suffering that the Stallings have endured during this entire ordeal. And I apologize to them both personally and for the state of Missouri.
During the press conference, Patty and David heard for the first time that custody of their son, DJ, had been returned to them. In October of 1991, just over 2 years after his brother's death, DJ came home for the first time.
Just want to make up for the 1.5 years that we didn't have him, and it's hard to make up that much time, but I'm doing the best I can.
His condition is very scary, but we've tackled so many hard things that, you know, we've just kind of said, we'll beat this too. And with that attitude, I know that DJ will do all right and that we'll do okay. He is a miracle child, and we're lucky to have DJ, and we have our whole life back. It's like we're starting over. It's indescribably wonderful.
When we return, a prison reformer is murdered outside his office in Salem, Oregon. His family believes he may have been assassinated to keep him quiet. In February 1980, the New Mexico State Penitentiary in Santa Fe was rocked by a violent uprising. By the time order was restored, 33 prisoners had died at the hands of fellow inmates. New Mexico's scandal-plagued penal system became front-page news across America. State Deputy Attorney General Michael Franke was brought in to investigate the riots and revamp the prison system.
You develop a calcified resistance to change among your...
Frankie, a former college football star and ex-Navy commander, achieved dramatic results. In New Mexico, he was a man of the hour, and his reforms gained national recognition.
Mike was very much his own man, not a follower in any sense of the word. He loved making decisions. He liked tackling difficult problems. He had a very quick mind.
Michael Frankie's growing reputation soon brought him a new challenge. In 1987, the governor of Oregon asked Frankie to take over his state's troubled prison system.
Michael Frankie was the best selection that the governor made in all of his new appointments. And I think we all felt that there was going to be some very, very good things happening in corrections. We were all excited about him, and I really can't tell you just how much of a shock it was when he was murdered.
Tragically, on January 17, 1989, Michael Frankie's distinguished career came to an abrupt, violent end. He was found stabbed to death just outside his office building in Salem, Oregon. Before he died, Michael Frankie told his family that he was in the midst of a top-secret investigation that would detail corruption in the Oregon prison system, particularly drug trafficking. He apparently planned to name names and implicate several highly placed government officials. The district attorney believes Michael Frankie fell victim to a robbery gone wrong, but Frankie's family is convinced he was assassinated. They think someone wanted Michael Frankie silenced and his findings on the Oregon prison system suppressed forever.
The three main criminal activities that I observed working in corrections was the introduction of drugs into the institution, falsifying of records, and thefts of state property. Basically, anything that was not nailed down was subject to be stolen. There was a constant flow of drugs being brought into the institutions. One of the most common ways was staff bringing them in their own lunch buckets because there was no searches being conducted on staff as they entered or left the facility. I was told by my superiors to keep my mouth shut and mind my own business or I'd be looking for a job.
When Mike came in, he's got a good old boy system to contend with. A lot of these guys have been here for 20 or 30 years. The system has run the way they want it to run for that. So here comes some guy from out of state who has all these high-minded ideas about what he's going to do, and it just rubbed a lot of them the wrong way.
Michael Frankie gathered what some believe was concrete evidence confirming that the state prison system contained corrupt elements reaching all the way to the top. By the end of 1988, he was conducting an intense personal investigation. Michael Frankie knew he was juggling political dynamite that could blow up in his face at any moment.
He had uncovered a lot of organized crime, and I said, "You mean like the mafia?" And he said, "No, an organized criminal element in the system," and that he was going to do a thorough house cleaning immediately after the first of the year, and that his quote was, "A lot of heads were going to roll." And he said it may cost him his job.
Yellow.
Hi, Mike.
Who's this?
This is Katie. How are you?
Katie. How you doing?
On January 13th, I called Michael.
Good.
And he said that he was going to go before the legislature and clean house the following Wednesday. Well, you did that in New Mexico. You cleaned house before.
Yeah, I know, Katie, but this is different. Seems I really ruffled some feathers
He
today.
was very, very concerned. And I think he had uncovered something far bigger than he expected.
4 days later, Michael Frankie was found murdered on a side porch of his office building. Police quickly began to piece together the last hours of his life. At 6:50 p.m., after the regular Tuesday staff meeting, Frankie spoke briefly with one of his subordinates. 30 minutes later, two other corrections employees noticed that the light in Michael Frankie's car was on, and the driver's door was standing wide open.
Michael?
It was 7:20 p.m.
Michael? Well, his phone's in here. Well,
this is kind of weird. He never leaves his car like this with the door open.
Right.
Listen,
The two women could not find Frankie. nor could they reach him on his pager, which he carried with him at all times. They called their superiors. 2 officials arrived at 8:30 p.m. and conducted, in their words, a meticulous search of the building. Frankie was nowhere to be found.
Anything up there?
The 2 men did not call the police and left around 9:30 p.m. At 12:45 a.m., a security guard found Michael Frankie's body on the side porch of the building that had been so thoroughly searched just 4 hours earlier. A pane of glass in the side door was shattered. No one knows whether or not Frankie was carrying documents concerning his prison investigation. However, his briefcase appeared to be missing.
Not a body here. I think it's Frankie.
Police theorized that Frankie had been murdered by someone who was trying to rob him. They interrogated a number of known drug dealers and street criminals.
I need to know where you were that night. Now, you told me earlier you were there at 9:30, and then you come back and you tell me...
One of them claimed that he witnessed the murder and fingered an admitted drug dealer named Frank Gable. According to this witness, Gable was in the act of burglarizing Michael Frankie's car when Frankie came out of the office building around 7 p.m.
What's going on?
Nothing's going on. Just give me your briefcase.
There's nothing in there you're gonna get. I want to know what you're doing with my car.
I'm not doing nothing in your car. Just give me the briefcase.
Okay, punk, I'm taking you inside. Ow, ow.
Gable allegedly stabbed Frankie, mortally wounding him. Some believe Gable also stole Frankie's briefcase before fleeing. Michael Frankie apparently staggered up the stairs of a side entrance to the building. He broke the glass door in a desperate attempt to get back to his office. Frank Gable was charged with the murder of Michael Frankie, but for many people, the evidence simply did not add up. Bruises, abrasions, and other wounds on Frankie's body seemed to indicate a struggle with more than one man.
I think Frank Gable is a scapegoat because I think it goes much higher up in the Oregon government. And he's just being used to take the fall.
From the onset of the Frankie investigation, it appeared that the police put the blinders on as far as what they were most inclined to believe.
It seems as though there has been some reluctance to really just scorch the earth to find out what happened.
Michael Frankie's family and supporters found what they felt were other disturbing discrepancies in the official explanation of Michael's death. Michael had a state-of-the-art car alarm system. If the killer had broken into the car, why was the alarm not set off? And why were there no signs of forced entry?
Hey, what's going on?
Nothing's going on. What's in your briefcase?
If the killer had stabbed Michael at the car, puncturing his heart and lungs, why was there no trace of blood within 100 feet of the car? And finally, if Michael Frankie was killed at 7 p.m., as police estimate, why was neither his body nor the broken glass noticed when the building was meticulously searched between 8:30 and 9:30 p.m.?
Looking all the offices. Nothing down here either.
A number of people in Oregon believe that Michael Frankie was a victim of a premeditated murder carried out by several men and possibly instigated by high-ranking officials who feared they would be named in Frankie's investigation. An eyewitness at the scene appeared to corroborate this theory.
At 10:15, 10:20 on January 17th, a young man riding in a car looked over at where the scene of the crime was and saw 5 to 6 men running toward a Volkswagen van. If Michael Frankie had been abducted and then brought back to the building where he was killed, this would fit in with the abduction theory.
The abduction theory holds that on the night of his death, Michael Frankie unlocked his own car, deactivating the alarm. Simultaneously, a group of men approached him.
Coming with us.
What's up? All right. Just back off.
Frankie did not keep regular office hours, except for Tuesday staff meetings. It would seem that the perpetrators were familiar with his schedule.
The abduction theory would have that Michael Frankie was later brought back, perhaps to go into his office to find whatever paperwork or computer files or these sort of things in his office.
All right, let's go up to the office.
What for?
Computer tapes.
I don't have any.
Once there, he gets out of the car, perhaps sees his only chance for getting away, tries to make a break for it, perhaps receives one or more of his wounds at that time, goes to the north porch where he is finished off.
Unfortunately, the impression has been given that that things are being held back, that many things are being stonewalled. It is given the impression, again, not saying it's the fact, but it's given the impression that there's some type of a cover-up.
On the night of the murder, several people reported seeing a man in a pinstripe suit lurking in the corrections building after hours. He was olive-complected, 5 feet 10 inches tall, and weighed approximately 180 pounds. A composite drawing based on witness descriptions was made, but the DA's office did not release the drawing for 5 months. They claimed the quality was not good enough for publication, even though the composite had been drawn by a top police artist. One other disturbing fact added to the speculation about a cover-up. No paperwork detailing Michael Frankie's investigation into the Oregon prison system has ever been found.
Shortly after Michael Frankie's death, some people, some employees, some inmates spotted approximately 23 bags of shredded papers coming out of Michael Frankie's office and some surrounding offices. That's something you have to wonder about, is who authorized shredding of documents from a murder scene?
The officials investigating Mike's murder don't want it solved because it goes much higher in the Oregon government.
My family is dedicated to bringing this to a successful conclusion. We're going to find out what the hell happened, and we're going to see that the people who are involved receive their full punishment.
Next, a mother in New England needs your help to find her autistic son. When he was 8 years old, Oded Gordon was diagnosed with a minor learning disability. At age 12, he began to withdraw from his friends. By the time he was 18, Oded was totally withdrawn, unwilling to communicate with anyone.
Oded was afraid of the responsibility of growing up because he didn't have the emotional wherewithal. He was too anxious. He was too afraid he couldn't do things on his own.
A year later, Oded was diagnosed as having autism, a neurological disorder that affects physical, social, and language skills. There is no known cure for the affliction, and doctors had little hope that Oded would ever return from his dark and silent world. Oded's mother enrolled him in a facility in Greenfield, New Hampshire, where young people with mental and emotional disabilities participate in work therapy and receive counseling. Oded seemed to respond to his new environment and even began communicating with one staff worker.
When Oded came, he spoke very little, but then we would hear him speak occasionally, and he could say things when prompted and encouraged.
Approximately 6 weeks after he arrived at the farm, Oded and several other residents were doing their afternoon chores. Somehow, Oded managed to wander away from the group. An hour later, he was nowhere to be found.
The dogs were brought in and originated the search over by the brook area, over toward the lower left field.
The search dogs followed Oded's scent for approximately 3 miles. Along a stretch of Highway 31, the scent abruptly vanished. Authorities believe that Oded may have been picked up by a passing motorist.
My feelings are that he will be found. He's out there. He's out there among the population, wherever it may be, but he is out there.
There have been several reported sightings of Oded, the most recent last January. Oded's mother believes her son is still alive and hopes that wherever he is, he will hear her appeal.
Oded, I really would like to hear from you. If you can, I hope that you'll call. Call me or call your grandmother or your uncles. You don't have to tell us where you are. We just want to know that you're okay.
Oded Gordon is 5 feet 8 inches tall, weighs 140 pounds, and has black hair and brown eyes. At the time of his disappearance, Oded was 21 years old. Authorities speculate that he may have hitchhiked out of the area and could be anywhere in the United States. For every mystery, there is someone, somewhere, who knows the truth. Perhaps that someone was watching. Perhaps it's you.